Hello everybody. Happy New Year. Thank you all for coming and welcome to the first Seaside Heritage Network seminar of 2024. And our theme today is entertainment at the Seaside. And it's stating the obvious to say that the Seaside is about entertainment because we all know that since the 19th century, the Seaside has been a place of entertainment, diversion, distraction and fun. And this remains true today. And this was our reason for picking entertainment as the topic for this seminar, because it's just so important. But in fact, the topic is so huge, I suspect we're going to have future seminars on this. Anyway, we've got three presentations today, which are looking at various aspects of entertainment at the Seaside. So let's get straight on with it. So our first speakers are Malcolm McLaughlin and Tom Rees-Smith, who are both from the University of East Anglia in Norwich, where they're associate professor and professor respectively. And they're both specialists in cultural history in both Britain and America. And they've recently developed interests in seaside entertainment, which perhaps inevitably took them to Great Yarmouth. And so they're going to talk today about Great Yarmouth Hippodrome. In fact, they recently published an academic paper about circus at the Seaside. So Malcolm and Tom, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll launch our PowerPoint. So that's done. We're out of the woods with that. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah, looks good.
Brilliant. Hi everyone. So I'm Thomas Roy-Smith, and it's a real pleasure to be able to speak to you all today about our relatively new but ongoing research project into the early years of the Great Yarmouth Hippodrome, founded in 1903 and still in operation today as one of only two functioning purpose-built circuses, both of which operate at the Seaside, the other, of course, being in Blackpool.
Can you hear me all? Yeah.
Yes.
Can you all hear me? So I'm Malcolm McLaughlin. Nice to be here. So as Tom was saying, this is a place that sits on our doorstep, really. But although the Hippodrome is a really important part of the culture and economy of Great Yarmouth, its history actually remains largely unknown and unexplored, which came as kind of a surprise once we started looking into it. So the research project really came about through a series of organic conversations that Tom and I had. And after a little bit of light digging, which became slightly heavier digging, we continued to amaze and astonish ourselves at the story that was starting to emerge from the archive. It was helped along by great fortune, actually, because we discovered that our university, the University of East Anglia, holds an archive relating to Seaside Entertainment, the Herbert Tinkler archive. Mr. Tinkler was a local Norfolk resident who'd actually amassed a rather vast collection. It's a real treasure trove, actually, of local theatrical memorabilia, which included a wide array of hippodrome-related material, some of it going quite some way back, actually. And he'd also compiled a really detailed and comprehensive chronology of all the acts who had played at the Hippodrome, going back to its prehistory, actually, as an old wooden theatre, right up through the creation of the building that we know today and into the 20th century.
Yes, that was pretty lucky, wasn't it? And we definitely made good use of Mr. Tinkler's life of collecting there. So the story that we pursued over the course of this project is one in which a vivid international circus culture came into contact with a burgeoning English seaside experience at a pivotal time in the fortunes of both. And today we'll share some highlights from what we discovered about the foundation of the Hippodrome in 1903, and the extraordinary cast of global characters who made their way to the Great Yarmouth coast in the early years of the 20th century. So the story has to begin with the foundational figures of George Gilbert and Jenny O'Brien, who were married equestrian circus superstars at a time when equestrian acts were really the heart of the circus. And it was their extraordinary journey through international circus culture which culminated in the foundation of the Hippodrome. You can see them there in an illustration from the graphic in the 1880s. George Gilbert is the man bestriding two horses, and Jenny O'Brien is being held aloft. And you can actually also see Jenny O'Brien bottom right, because she also had an act where involving pigeons and a gun, which does not involve shooting the pigeons with the gun. But the exact details of which are a little confusing, but definitely involved the pigeons doing a variety of highly trained and specific acts. But definitely best known for her equestrianism. And both of these figures actually had a connection to the region. George Gilbert was actually born in Norwich before he ran away to join the circus in classic style at the age of 11. But Jenny O'Brien was from quite a significant circus family. And she remembered in an interview in 1888 that her career began when she was 6, when her father's circus was actually set up at Norwich. So both of them kind of traced their circus roots back to Norwich. And separately, they became renowned circus performers, famed for various acrobatic feats on horseback and with doves, working with the major names and in the premier venues of the period. And in 1880, they were both performing in London at Hengler's Cirque, and they were booked on the same bill, and they were married 3 months later. And really true global stardom actually followed, particularly for Jenny. George, but Jenny was really famous in a whole variety of ways. She conquered Paris in the 1880s, and these are posters and photographs from their time in Paris. So there we can see a kind of a photograph version of the act that was depicted on the front of the graphic magazine, and that is from Herbert Tinkler's collection. So happy to mention him again here. And here we have two posters from Jenny's time at the Paris Hippodrome. So you can see that the hippodromes had a significant role in their careers. And in 1888, they probably got their biggest booking when they toured across America with Barnum and Bailey's circus. Jenny O'Brien made a great hit yesterday, reported the New York Tribune in April 1888. So they were really at the upper echelons of what circus culture meant in this period when circus was a massive entertainment form. Yet not long after they toured New York, the pair made a homecoming. So in 1893, they set up in the Norwich Agricultural Hall. And they set up their own circus. And this quickly became a fixture in Norwich in the winter. And this was quite an endeavour in itself, and definitely involved at least one significant coup, because Gilbert and O'Brien managed to book legendary tightrope walker Charles Blondin for an appearance in Norwich, which is quite remarkable, actually. I didn't even know he was still going in 1893. I think it might be one of his last ones, but nonetheless, he was there. And their success in Norwich led them to a new development, and finally led them to the seaside, because in 1898, Gilbert O'Brien made plans to construct a temporary wooden building on the coast at Great Yarmouth to house a circus. Now, immediately, the construction of this space to house a circus on the seafront was a bit controversial. Gilbert was granted permission for the structure, but there was also some contentious debate about it in the local council and in the local press, where complaints from concerned residents started to flood in, mainly addressing the question of safety. What is our council thinking about? This is one enraged and anonymous letter writer to the local press, to pass plans for a wooden building for a circus in a densely populated part of the town, joining a fried fish shop and other such inflammable property. When full of people, what chances there of all escaping should it catch fire? It might be a death trap to many. So there were some reservations amongst the residents of Great Yarmouth, at least. But this temporary circus was a great success. And after having been in operation for a number of seasons, at the end of the summer in September 1902, the Eastern Daily Press, so one of the big local papers, reported that it had been a record season for the circus and announced that exciting plans were afoot. Mr. Gilbert determined early in the season to enlarge his borders and elaborated a scheme for the erection of a grand building to be called the Yarmouth Hippodrome, which has not its like outside London. And this was the building that was eventually constructed. And the construction of the Hippodrome was definitely in keeping with a mood of civic expansion in Great Yarmouth in this period. It was a time when it was hoped that new railway links and the development of new attractions like the Wellington Pier and the Winter Garden would increase visitor numbers from across the country. And it might have been in keeping with this spirit, but there was some further resistance from members of the local planning and licensing committees about the ways in which a circus might change the character of the seaside town. Nonetheless, the Hippodrome opened in July 1903 to much fanfare. The Yarmouth Mercury marvelled, "No ephemeral structure this, adapted to a fleeting prosperity, but an enduring tribute to the permanence of Yarmouth's position in the affections of holidaymakers the wide kingdom over. Profoundly impressed by this amazing palace of amusement, the Mercury imagined that the Hippodrome made oldest Yarmouth shake its head in a sort of wonder too great for even a grumble at the progressiveness of the times. So, Hippodrome seemed modern, seemed progressive. But now that Gilbert and O'Brien had opened their new permanent seaside circus building, what kind of entertainments did they provide? Over to you, Malcolm.
Indeed, and before we move on, actually, Tom, I just remembered there's something maybe to say about this image that you're showing here. On the right hand side of your screen, there's a photograph of a program there from I think 1909, and it's a photograph of a program that's in the Herbert Tinkler archive. And whilst we don't know for sure, it's just really occurred to us recently. Herbert Tinkler was born in 1902. He would have been about 7 or 8 at the time. There's a rather tantalizing, lovely notion that this program here, paper program, was one that he might have saved from his own boyhood visiting the great Yarmouth Hippodrome, which, as speculative as it is, made me very, very excited. The idea that he might himself have seen Jenny O'Brien and George Gilbert perform together. There's so many sort of wonderful stories and ways in which this archive just sort of brings the past to life as you're exploring it. But actually, on that point, Tom, if you could move to the next slide, please. Yes. And here are some posters from some of the acts who appeared. As a local journalist put it, Tom, you'll remember they visited. You found this lovely quotation. It was a journalist had visited George Gilbert in his country home near Reedham in the Broads. And made this point that Mr. Gilbert had literally the pick of the world's acrobats, gymnasts, trick cyclists, swimmers, equestrians, and artistes of every possible description. His home kind of full of souvenirs and posters, a sort of really fires the imagination what George Gilbert's house would have been like, this wonderful circus impresario. But here we have some posters for the acts that appeared in the first season. Animal acts were really very, very popular initially. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here. And the very first act to appear actually was Tilly Bebe, the girl lion tamer, who'd come over from the continent. She presented herself as the world's only girl lion tamer. Actually, she was actually a fully grown up woman, but she used her slight stature to play the part of a girl and sort of dress the part. And she would carry the lions around, as you can see here, treat them like kittens. And in the top right of the poster there's her cuddling up with all the big cats like their pets. And the thing is, she was a huge star at the time. She was a huge star on the continent, and when she arrived in the UK, there was a huge amount of interest for her. These acts were not just sort of popping up at the Great Yarmouth Hippodrome, but actually they were part of the modern circus and variety circuit that had developed around the Edwardian era, which is what we're looking at here. And so Tilly Bebe had made her way around London and a number of other palaces of entertainment before arriving at Great Yarmouth, being booked, and did interviews with journalists and playing a little bit about that vulnerability she had, but also showing the scars that she had from the lions. But she really wowed audiences as at Great Yarmouth. Also, other international acts were following the same circuit, and they would get booked in again in that first season. The clown Zertho with his performing dogs. And on the right-hand side, the performing bears of Purmain. If you've heard of Purmain and his bears from this time, any of you who are sort of into Edwardian circus and variety theatre, you'll maybe have encountered Purmain. He seemed to have had a lot of trouble keeping his bears in their cages, and there are various reports of his time in London of him having to run around and chase after his bears, and occasionally they'd give theatre staff a bit of a whack. So there's a slight sort of edge of danger that was actually quite real. If Tilly Bebe played that up, with her lions, and got the occasional clip with Burmese bears. You get the impression that the danger might have been a little bit more real. But here they are again. I mean, it doesn't really play well to today's audiences or to our tastes. Bears getting drunk, oh dear, and dogs being trained. In Zertha, there were lots of questions raised even at the time about the welfare of the dogs that he trained and his techniques for training them. But if you visit the Great Yarmouth Hippodrome, underneath, they have this sort of cavernous space with all the animal cages still there, which the owners, the J family, use to showcase their own memorabilia. And it's a sort of reminder of, to go down there is to sort of remind yourself of how important animal acts were. But in addition to that, thank you, Tom, there were acrobats and jugglers and strongmen, and again, real stars of their time. Paul Spadoni was a massive international star. And here he is being shown juggling a cannonball. He was well known at the time for his particular motif was riding a horse and cart onto stage, taking the horse and cart apart and juggling with the various components, the wheels and the body and so on and so forth. Juggling anvils and all sorts, combining that sort of strongman juggler routine. But there again, he was moving through the Great Yarmouth Hippodrome, bringing some of that international glamour to Yarmouth, really. Here in the top right, the King of Contortionists, Pablo Diaz, the Cuban Wonder. He was known as the Human Serpent. You can sort of make out this is from a London-based magazine at the time, National Magazine, Pearson's, I think it was, where they had a nice photo shoot with him. And I just wish that they'd been able to use color film at the time, because this is him in his skin-tight suit, designed to look like snake skin, so it would have sort of caught the light. And again, he's coming from Cuba. He'd been a big hit in the United States, and he was over here in the UK at the time. And as he toured Britain and got rave reviews, he landed temporarily in Yarmouth. And there were lots of acts like this. The other one there, the Martafee troupe, they were acrobats that were really highly rated performers that had been through France. Sometimes these performers like Spadoni were using sort of old established strongman routines. Others like Pablo Diaz were kind of fantastical. The Martafee troupe, rather like some other acts, sort of played up kind of ethnic identity. So here they were from the Balkans, and they're sort of dressed in a sort of showbiz version or interpretation of traditional Balkan costumes. But again, you know, what they all have in common is that they were part of this really exciting international circuit, and a reminder really of the diversity and dynamism of British variety entertainment at the time, and this moment where the variety circuit and circus entertainment are crossing over. So, Tom, I wonder if your connections...
I'm back. Sorry, yes.
Back. Yeah, great. So I got a little note from you there saying that's a relief.
I think we're out of time as well, actually. So I will just skip past this guy. If anyone's interested in Mr. Durrell, the log roller, and what happened to him at the Great Yarmouth Hippodrome in 1903, then I think there's time for that in questions. And otherwise, I think it's just interesting to see George Gilbert's slightly neglected grave. Jenny O'Brien is also buried there, but isn't depicted. But obviously, just to say that the Hippodrome is still carrying on the legacies that they created in 1903, and Yarmouth itself has a wider reputation for circus these days as well, thanks to organisations like Out There Arts. And as we continue this project, we're hoping to draw the lines between the kind of archival work we're doing in 1903 and the very vibrant circus culture that still carries on in Yarmouth today. Any other final words, Malcolm? I thought we'd better wrap it up quickly.
No, apologies, I was sort of vamping there for a bit, so I sort of went slightly over time. Beg your pardon, everyone.
That's it. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Virtual clap, everybody. I suspect there's loads more you could say to us about the Great Yarmouth Hippodrome. Maybe that'll be the subject for a future talk. But yeah, thanks for giving us that taste of what it's all about. So our audience, I'd say there will be an opportunity to ask questions after all the presentations. You can either ask them by calling out, or you can ask your question through chat. We'll move on now to our next speaker, who is Rachel Sykes from Showtown in Blackpool. And she's the stakeholder and engagement coordinator. And she's worked for Blackpool Council since 2014 and has been in a current role at Showtown since 2016. And we're all quite excited about this because Showtown opens on the 15th of March. So, Rachel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Yes, we're absolutely thrilled and delighted that this project is close to opening that we've ever been. So Showtown, for those of you who don't know, this is Blackpool Council's project for showcasing and delivering the museum that is the shop front of all our Seaside Heritage and Entertainment. Next slide, please, Anya. So this is the building that we're going in. It is quite a unique opportunity to go into this building. We're on the first floor of this building, half of the first floor, and the rest of the hotel is going to be the rest of the building is going to be a hotel. And as you can see there, we are next door but one to the tower, which is a great location. So we're delighted with that. At the position of where we will be, very much from a visitor attraction point of view. Next slide, please, Anya. So what will Showtown be? So it'll be a mix of displays, audio, visual and interactives. So very animated, very interactive, a chance to bring out over 300 3D and 2D objects. So obviously we have some beautiful objects we've managed to secure from partners, and they'll be going on display, as well as our collections material that we're able to showcase. Our stories will be brought to life by our cast and crew, so they will be our live performers that will be performing each day and taking you through Showtown and enhancing your knowledge and your experience of your Showtown visit. And then there's extra content as well that will be available through a visitor app, which will prove popular with people who are looking to delve a little bit deeper into that interpretation, as well as a useful tool for people who need additional support if they've got hearing or visual impairment. We've got a state-of-the-art temporary exhibition gallery, so that will be our rotating exhibitions, and we've got that opportunity to be able to bring exhibitions and collections and different sorts of exhibits to Showtown and to Blackpool. And we've also got a learning suite, which is very kindly sponsored at the moment by the Sir Ken Dodd Foundation. Next slide, Anya, thank you. So talking about our collections, and certainly it rang a bell there when you were talking about Mr. Tinkler, and our gentleman is Cyril Critchlow. So he had the foresight to collect all things entertainment. He had his own entertainment museum, and he's left us over 150 odd volumes and items of memorabilia, theatre, entertainment, pictures. He's also written his comments down as well, and he's seen a lot of these acts. So that was our starting point. And these are Blackpool Council's collections, and they underpin everything that you'll see going forward. So you can see the variety of collections that we have there. Next slide. Thank you, Anya. So our Showtown themes. So besides the seaside, obviously, we can't start anywhere else but on the seaside. So that is the first stage for the entertainment, and that's how we want to celebrate that. House Tricks is our magic section. Roll Up, our circus section. Oh, I'm getting a bit of feedback on that. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Better with the lights on, our illumination section. Showtime, I always get that wrong because I'm always saying Showtown, is our central section that will celebrate everything about entertainment and shows. And then Everybody Dance Now is our dance gallery. Next slide, please, Anya. So these are some little sneak peeks there of what's happening. We've got a 15-metre wall there that's a television, a screen that will actually incorporate our digital assets, our stories, and it's very much animated film that you will be able to dip in and out of it in your experience. You can see there that there's looking just from that angle there's a lot of animation that will tell a lot of stories from those first entertainers from the Seaside area. Next slide, please, Anya. House tricks, so our magic section, very much focused around the magicians that have developed their calling in Blackpool, and certainly celebrating the Blackpool Magic Convention that happens here every February and brings 5,000 magicians to town. It will be very reflective of magicians, both old and who are still current, and obviously Sutty, the major magician, will feature in there as well, as he was born on North Pier, so he's also in that section as well. Next slide, please, Anya. So here's Belle, our baby elephant. She's in our circus section, so you can see there, this was a work site when I took this picture. She has been on site for a long time, as she had to get in due to her size, but surrounded by her within this section, we are able to bring out our circus posters and all our rich material that we house in our Tower and Winter Gardens archive. We have a full circus section and archive of what happened at Blackpool Tower Circus. That includes over 7,000 images that were taken of the act. So we have done major projects with the circus community and our valued volunteers to understand what those pictures are and make sure that this really significant part of Blackpool's entertainment heritage is really quite rich. We've also worked with a lot of families in there to bring circus objects and material culture to life. So again, we've been very fortunate to reach out to that circus community and have that input. So that's really rich in costume and knowledge and quotes, and it's just an absolute fun place. On the other side of what you can see there is a small circus ring as well. So you'll be able to, it's a big top, you'll be able to go in there and learn some circus skills as well. So everything we do throughout Showtown, it's about learning, encouragement and developing skill as well as learning. Next slide, please, Anya. So this is the central part that I was talking about. This is the Showtime section, and this big screen where you can see applause. This will be a big interactive where you can choose 2 or 3 of the footage of different entertainers there, and you can do what we would call, of a certain age, a clapometer. So you'll be able to choose your bill. Are they better? Do you think they're good, but or indifferent, or where do they fit on your clapometer? There's a manual interactive there called the bill as well. So we want to teach people about the bill and why you are significant when you are top of the bill, and actually so they understand that. On the other side of this space, we have 3 backstage wardrobes, and in there we've got some beautiful collections, and I actually have a little peek yesterday as these objects are going in. I have to say it's looking fabulous, and in there we've got items such as Morecambe and Wise costumes from the V&A Museum. We've got Tessie O'Shea's costumes and items from the British Music Hall Society and other key partners up and down the country, and private collectors as well. Next slide, please, Anya. So this is what you saw then, the previous slide of the Showtime gallery. This is as you come out. This gives you a feel of the buildings and entertainment venues. Some are still there, some have sadly gone. And this space is, we call it the skyline, and it brings those buildings back that we have sadly lost. But actually within here as well, we've got an opportunity for further interpretation and interactives where you could learn more about the entertainers who came to Blackpool. So once again, it's very interactive, and each time you go on site, more and more has been added to this space. So that's the skyline area. Next slide, please, Anya. These are some of the objects that we have loaned from the British Music Hall Society. It's a strong partnership we have with them, and they have a wonderful collection. So we've got Vesta Tilly's suit and little shoes and George Roby's hat and these beautiful items that are available for us to loan. And we've worked up that partnership, and we hope that will continue as well. So a lot about this project, as well as building a museum and finding all that research and content, is around the partnerships and bringing more knowledge to Blackpool. Next slide, please, Anya. So this is literally the workspace. So a lot of people don't know that Blackpool Illuminations are homegrown, and they are designed and made here, and they are put up here as well. And it's certainly an area where we want to share that, where previous artists and designers are telling their story. So above the orange railing there, you can see there's a little seat, and you can sit in there and you can travel through our beautiful Illuminations archive. And we've digitized the designs in there that don't get on display, because this is a working factory in Blackpool, so you can't just turn up and go and have a look at things. So we did replicate some of the internal workings of that factory. And then further down at the bottom, there's an opportunity for you to create your own illuminations, and then it will be projected onto the screen at the far end. So especially for people who are thinking about taking up any sort of art or design, these designers have been taught at Blackpool Art College. They went on to do these jobs. They've had successful careers and are very proud of what they do. And again, it's reinforcing that message of what Blackpool has to offer. Next slide, please, Anya. Everybody dance now. So you can't have Blackpool without dance. So it's this is a beautiful gallery that is celebrating the genres of dance throughout the decade. So in here, we've got a lovely case that we are showcasing some of the items from the Blackpool dance competitions. So they happen all year round, but the major one is in May, and that's the international one. We have something like 64 countries that come to compete in Blackpool, and it's a beautiful, beautiful time of the year. And we found that within this community, their collecting of material culture is very lean. They pass it on, they sell it on. It's a commodity. It isn't a museum object piece. So we had to contemporary collect to make sure we've got some beautiful pieces in here from the 2019 Blackpool Dance Festival to tell that story. We've also worked closely with DSI, who are the company who make the Strictly dresses, and they are also featuring in here as well, because we can't have dance without talking about Strictly. And we've also got a ballroom where you can have a ballroom floor that you can have a little dance yourself, and there'll be an interactive where you can stand behind it and your body will move and your head will be in the hole, and that'll project that. So, and within this space we've got an area that you can't see, but it's over to the back, talking specifically about the music of Blackpool, the big band music, the entertainment, and the Northern Soul, and bringing that right up to date to make sure we're capturing those audiences. So that's the end of the gallery. Is there another slide, Anya? I can't remember. So this is our public programme. So as well as obviously the gallery visits that you can come and do, tickets are on sale as we speak. These are some of our public programme events that we are hosting, and we are hoping that actually that will draw our cultural tourists into Blackpool. So as well as a visit, they will book onto some of our events and historical talks and tours, and we shall make sure that actually our seaside heritage is preserved and shared. I think that was it, Anya. Yes, there you go. That's our new charity number. So we're now out of Blackpool Council, and we are now Blackpool Heritage and Museum Trust, and quite proud that we've got our charitable status for us moving forward as Showtown. Thank you very much.
That's great, Rachel. That was fascinating. Thank you very much. Blackpool seems the obvious location for a museum of fun and entertainment. And thank you for that sneak preview. I think quite a lot of us will be paying a visit to Blackpool sometime later this year to have a look for ourselves. Excellent. So thank you. Our final speaker is Joe Burns, but of course, Punch and Judy men are always referred to by the title Professor. So can I introduce Professor Joe Burns, who's talking about Punch and Judy at the Seaside. And Joe's from Brighton and he's been performing since the age of 12. And he's one of the relatively few Punch and Judy men still performing, making a living from it. And he also does corporate events and bookings when he's not performing at the Seaside. And his show is called the Punch and Judy Club, and his website describes this as the custodian of Mr. Punch's heritage, which I like. So, Joe, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just working out how to screen share, everyone. Bear with me one moment. I'm working on a phone. And even though I'm a millennial, I'm terrible with technology. 1 second, everyone. Good afternoon. In 1996, a 4-year-old boy sat on the burning hot sands at Weymouth and saw his first Punch and Judy show. It was at that moment he was inspired to make that funny-looking squeaky puppet a major part of his life. My name's Professor Joe Burns. Now, some of you watching might be professors too. You'd have to have a degree and either have or be pursuing a PhD. I have neither a degree, nor do I have or am I pursuing a PhD. My title is self-appointed, and it's part of a long history of Punch and Judy men who have over-egged their status to sound cleverer than they really are. I'm the resident Punch and Judy man on Swanage Beach in Dorset. I took over the running of the Swanage show in 2016, 2 years after my predecessor retired after 30-odd years of working the beach. There's so much I could talk about this evening. Like any expert, I could witter on for hours about my specialist subject. To understand the heritage of Seaside Punch and Judy, let's whiz through the broader history of Punch and Judy in general. There's been a tradition of folk puppetry in the United Kingdom since at least the Middle Ages, as demonstrated in the Bodleian Library's illuminated manuscripts of the Romance of Alexander. As you can see here, these shows are very similar to the shows we know today. A hand puppet wielding a weapon in a booth, what we call our theatres. Whilst this manuscript is in Flemish, the V&A argues that it might represent English shows, or it could have even been written by English scribes. So fast forward 330-ish years. There's been quite a few impolite wars, and there's even been quite a civil war. England has been a republic and the monarchy has been restored. King Charles II reverses some anti-fun laws by Cromwell, and European performers are able to come to the UK to entertain. In 1662, Samuel Pepys saw Pietro Germond give an Italian puppet show in Covent Garden, featuring a character called Pulcinella with a large nose, a humpback, and a squeaky voice, based on a Commedia dell'arte stock character that was originally played by actors in touring shows. Germond gave royal command performances to King Charles II and was given a golden medal for his service. These puppet performances were marionette or string puppet shows and were held in large tents that toured the country in fairs. These marionette spectaculars proved very popular, but once they started to fall out of fashion, some show proprietors decided to use simplified hand puppet shows in front of the shows to advertise what one may expect from the show inside. As these shows felt more outdated, these performers decided to take these simplified hand puppet shows out onto the streets to busk for a living. Pulcinella became more anglicised and by the mid-18th century was referred to as Punch. Mr. Punch found his wife, originally called Joan, later called Judy, and was performed in booths similar to those that had been seen 400-ish years before and more like we know Punch and Judy to be performed today. In 1827, John Payne Collier and George Cruikshank recorded the show, a Punch and Judy show performed by an elderly drunkard named Puccini. This is the first record in its entirety of a Punch and Judy show and gave all performers a basic blueprint to follow. But how accurate this record of the Punch and Judy shows seen by Payne Collier and Cruikshank is contested. George Speight, British puppet historian, believed that Payne Collier combined the script of Puccini's show with another show he saw in 1805. Now, it's not my place to claim that John Payne Collier's penchant for forgery and embellishment stretched as far as the beginning of his career when this was published. And despite his many frauds, John Payne Collier was a Shakespeare scholar. So it's fair for one to assume that maybe to give the show more gravitas, he put his documentation of Punch and Judy went through a Shakespearean filter. Punch and Judy performers throughout the 19th century followed the money they could make during shows, collected by a bottler. Now, the derivation of bottler is unknown. Some believe that it's because money was collected in a glass bottle and then smashed at the end of the day for the money to be counted. This was to make sure that no money was stolen from the performer, and also to make sure the money could be shared fairly between them. The bottler didn't only just collect money, they also provided music, either with a trumpet or, as you can see in the middle there, with panpipes and a drum. This was to bring in a crowd to the show, but also to give a soundtrack to the performance. It's also possible that the bottlers may have, may have interacted with the puppets to help convey meaning. Punch arrived at the seaside probably around the turn of the 19th century, where upper-class holidaymakers were enjoying the benefits of sea swimming and had spare money to spend. Once seaside resorts were able to be accessed by middle and working class holidaymakers, following the introductions of wakes weeks and the introduction of the railways at the end of the first industrial revolution, Punch and Judy at the seaside thrived. Virtually every seaside resort had a full-time professor performing at them. There were, however, a few resorts so big that there'll be multiple performers performing each year. But on the whole, it'll be one professor or one performer or one family working each resort. Many starting long family dynasties of professors. Most now lost to time, but a few remain. Maggs of Bournemouth, Owenson of Scarborough, and most importantly, Codman of Llandudno. Richard Codman started working in Llandudno in 1860, and his family are still running the show there today. Even though many Punch performers worked on beaches through the Victorian period, there were many still working the streets, and there were a few who were engaged for private events. Quite a few performers were engaged at the Great Exhibition, originally in Hyde Park, and later when it moved to Sydenham. The audiences there were vast. One professor said he performed to over 2,000 people at one show. Punch and Judy also found a home for a while in the music halls, and there are a couple of professors, Richard Codman included, who made a decent sideline out of the music halls. Punch and Judy became mainstays of British seaside holidays. With the introduction of cheap foreign holidays and guaranteed sunshine in the 1960s and 1970s, many resorts lost their performers as they weren't able to make enough money from each season. A few more performers remained on for as long as they could. But as costs raised and tourist numbers fell, by the end of the 20th century, more gave up working their beach pitches for more lucrative work, leaving us where we are today. There are currently only 3 Punch and Judy beaches that still have a full-time Punch and Judy show operating in the summer today, although one of those is on a promenade. They are Swanage, where I work, Weymouth, and Llandudno. There are also 7 other seafronts where audiences may be able to see a show on an ad hoc basis throughout the summer. They are Brighton, Broadstairs, Burnham-on-Sea, Eastbourne, Exmouth, Maplethorpe, and Teignmouth. There are probably around 200 Punch performers in the UK, careerist, hobbyist, and amateur shows that are mostly seen at parties and events. There are very few full-time Punch and Judy performers. There are even fewer who make their money from donations or contributions directly from their audience. Most subsidise their income from Punch and Judy with other jobs. As well as performing, I make for my show and others, mostly costumes, but I turn my hand to make anything I can. Across the 10-ish UK seasides, there are on estimate 454 performances of Seaside Punch and Judy annually, with a direct audience of 32,000 and an additional reach of 46,000, where people have stopped to see the show but haven't watched more than about 5 minutes. At these estimates, 78,000 people see Punch and Judy shows on seafronts on the UK. 75% of those people have seen a show at one of 3 resorts: Swanage, Weymouth or Llandudno. There's very little live entertainment still available in seaside resorts. In Llandudno, Swanage and Weymouth, Punch and Judy is the only live entertainment on offer regularly throughout the day. In these resorts, Punch is culture for the culturally unserved. There are many challenges to running a beach Punch and Judy show. My job is dependent on the great British weather. No season is the same. Some years it might not rain and I work through, and other years I have many days off due to inclement weather. But it's not just the weather I rely on, the generosity of our audiences. I can only speak about my show. I charge £2 per person to watch my 25-minute show. Roughly 50% of people pay exactly what they owe. 20% of people make a contribution of less than the full price, and 30% of people don't pay at all. Like the weather, there's good and bad years when it comes to asking people for money. We don't have the power to force people to pay. All we can do is ask. My living is hand to mouth, as it once was before. I'm very thankful I have a beach I work at and I can introduce Punch and Judy to new generations of families year after year, but surviving is more than a struggle. Thankfully, there isn't the threat of the workhouse over my head yet. Previous generations of performers have been able to buy themselves somewhere to live or retire comfortably from performing, but I know that's going to be out of my reach. But I don't feel I can give up working the beach. As the youngest of 3 full-time beach professors left, I don't want to be the last beach showman. Another big challenge that has appeared in the last 12 years or so is how the length of workable season has shrunk dramatically. When my mentor and the operator of the Weymouth show, Mark Poulton, started at Weymouth nearly 20 years ago, he was able to work from the Easter holidays to the end of September. Now we are only able to work the school holidays, and for me, that's the main summer holidays. Punch relies on how many children are in the audience. Since term time holiday for children was banned, it has been impossible for any seaside Punch and Judy show to work a full season. Despite what many say, Punch and Judy's popularity still remains. It hasn't been banned, it's evolved, as it has done many times in its 362-year history in this country. Punch refuses to be a museum piece. It's a living heritage that's continuing to change and adapt to give the audience who are sat in front of it what they want to see. Punch and Judy is a British icon, accessible to multi-generational audiences with no restrictions. All are welcome. Come along, pay your money or don't, and enjoy the show. This is proven by the popularity of alternative arts Mayfair Puppet Festival, which celebrates Punch's birthday in the UK each year in the garden of St Paul's Church in Covent Garden, and a more recent edition of the Punch and Judy Club's festival that was a hit in Bognor last September. There are hopes to bring this festival back to Bognor this year and possibly to other seaside resorts in future years to come, to celebrate Punch's heritage, but also to introduce the show to new audiences. There's a magic of Punch at the seaside. It escaped the bustling city streets and found solace at the seasides of our beautiful countries. I would say to most that my office is the best, but then again, it's a glorified shed on the beach. The future of Punch and Judy on the seaside in this country currently looks towards extinction. If nothing is done to recruit and train the next generation of beach performers, within 30 years, there will be no beach shows left. If the general consensus is that's all right, then more should be done to document these shows, what happens behind the scenes, and the people who are running it. But if it's agreed that something could be done to preserve these shows for perpetuity, I think an easy fix at a low cost would be a practice-based research apprenticeship, which could save Punch's future at the seaside. There are currently no training opportunities for younger performers, and I'm keen to set up an apprenticeship scheme for future beach professors. But whilst I want Punch and Judy to remain at the Seaside, I would hate if the future of Punch is just carbon copies of my show. Each performer must have their own individual voice and, in turn, their own individual show. Working as a beach professor isn't just the performance side. It involves sewing, carving, painting, repairing, marketing, sound engineering, lighting, social media management. Honestly, the list goes on. But how can an apprenticeship scheme fulfill all of that and still include the performance? How can I provide training to someone when my workspace is only just big enough for me? How can an apprentice afford to live and work near where I live and work? These are the questions I'm afraid I haven't got the knowledge to answer. Punch pitches aren't permanent structures. Once the shows are taken down for the last time, all that will be left are memories. No more opportunities for young children with hot sand between their toes to be inspired to make that funny-looking, squeaky-voiced puppet a major part of their lives too. You can contact me on my website, swanegepunch.co.uk, or on Instagram and Facebook, Swanage Punch and Judy. Thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Thanks, Joe. That was great. Could you stop sharing your screen, please?
Yeah, of course I can. I'll come back to you now. There we go. Is that done? There you go.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think the insight into the life of a Punch and Judy performer was fascinating, but it's hard to imagine the Seaside without the Punch and Judy show, and that was quite a kind of shocking note that you ended on. I think we all admire your dedication in keeping this going. Anyway, I have to thank our three speakers because they've all kept to time. Fantastic. And we have some time for questions now. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them into chat or put your hand up and ask, and let's see what people have to say.
I have a question. If I can...
go ahead, Anya. I'm just looking through chat, so you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll fill in the time. My question is to Tom and Malcolm, and I just wondered whether you had any thoughts on why the circus at Great Yarmouth has endured when so many other resorts have lost their circuses.
Yeah, that's a good question. Tom, shall I just jump in here?
Yeah, please do.
So the story continues through the 20th century. It was a circus through the 20s and 30s, although actually, it became more and more kind of variety theatre during those years, marching in step with changing tastes and fashion. It was taken over and run through the 50s as a circus, but by the sort of 60s and 70s, it was in decline. Actually, it almost vanished altogether. And in the late 1970s, it closed down. It was just about to be turned into a bingo hall when Peter Jay, formerly of the rock and roll group, the Jaywalkers, Peter Jay stepped in and bought it, and kind of, in a sort of mad genius move, decided that he could make it work if he turned it back into a circus, proper circus. And that's what he did. It's his vision, really, has saved the circus in Great Yarmouth from vanishing altogether, along with so many, I suppose, the last of them that made it just until the 60s and the 70s, as our last speaker was just saying, a time of downturn at the Seaside for entertainment. So he kept it going and reinvented it, reinvigorated it through the 70s and 80s. And after about 20 years, he decided he'd just shut up shop. So he announced in Great Yarmouth that it would be the last ever show. And we were all preparing, I guess, at that time to wave goodbye to the Hippodrome. But it turned out that this was a great marketing ruse. And in fact, the last blockbuster season was too good, and he just didn't shut it at that point, but rather, I think, pocketed a lot of the money and invested it in the Hippodrome. I guess he must have done, because it's continued to go from strength to strength ever since, actually. And now his son Jack Jay pretty much runs it, and it sort of I mean, wonderfully had that generational succession. So I think all credit really to the Jay family, and especially Peter Jay's vision, really, and bravery and commitment to Great Yarmouth and Seaside Entertainment.
Thank you.
There's plenty of appreciation for our speakers coming in on chat. Do feel free to ask any questions. Various people have asked a similar question to Joe. Sorry, Professor Joe. People are asking, have you had to tone down your storyline in this increasingly PC world? Somebody mentioned the woke brigade. Are there any aspects of Punch and Judy, I guess, that aren't considered appropriate in this day and age?
Yeah, I think we can look at all of the Seaside entertainment we've looked at today, really, even in the circus as well. I think where there is troublesome histories across our heritage, and actually a lot of these things that people just don't want to see today. And I've seen other performers use things which I wouldn't deem acceptable, and the audiences just switch off. It's really important that as performers nowadays we're giving the audiences what they want. Otherwise, Punch becomes stagnant, and that's when it feels outdated. It's really important that it runs with the times, and having black and white minstrels in the show may have worked in the 60s and the 70s, but it doesn't work in the 21st century.
So I guess, are you having to edit out or remove a lot of the violence that used to be associated with Punch and Judy?
Yeah, well, I think the violence part is an interesting one, because I see it as a stylized slapstick movement. It's choreographed rather than it being a fight. It has had to tone down a bit, and again, when I watch some shows and it can only be described as violent, that it makes me wince a bit and go, that isn't what people are wanting to watch. The stick is an important part of the show to punctuate points of it, and that choreography. I mean, a lot of people will talk about, Judy gets hit. Judy doesn't get hit in my show anymore. The tables have turned completely, and it's Judy versus Punch, not Punch versus Judy.
That's really interesting to hear. Thank you for that answer. We have a few more questions. I'm going to have to move on. There's a question for Rachel. Will there be any online events or talks at Showtown?
We did a lot of online talks and events in the pandemic, and they did work well, but they were very time consuming to create and produce. We've chosen to do face-to-face events for the forthcoming year because we actually need people to visit Blackpool, and that's our primary aim, is to get people to come and visit Blackpool, visit Showtown, and hopefully join in our public programme. We were tasked with attracting cultural tourists, so it's part of one of our outcomes. That isn't to say that they won't happen again in the future, but we just need a little bit of a bigger team of people to deliver it, and we're waiting for recruitment to happen and things like that. So we've gone with the stuff that we know we can manage for the capacity that we've got at the moment. But I'm sure as things go on, there will be things that are available online. But it isn't our priority. Our priority is to get people into the town.
Can I say that I'm going to be doing a couple of talks at Showtown on the 1st of August. Can't wait. So if anybody's in the Blackpool area wants to come and say hello, I'm talking about Seaside 100 and peers, social history of peers. So I will be there.
Nice plug. I want to be able to recall the dates from my mind. I'm glad you've got them. Everything's on the website, I think. Near enough, or it will be by next week.
I'm just looking at a question from Phil Long. Is street theatre a thing at the Seaside? I guess, Professor Joe, you might be best placed to answer that one.
There are some troupes. There were Piero troupes which were very popular, through the time. There are almost, places where you may see similar things, especially, as I said, Exmouth and Teignmouth. They do some great stuff about putting entertainment culture down there. I haven't seen a lot of street theatre where I work in Swanage, but I'm from Brighton, and you can't go 5 meters without seeing an actor doing something.
Okay. Well, it's just come up to 5:30. There's an interesting debate on chat all about wokeness, but I think we'll move on from that. I can't see any other questions. So I think on behalf of everybody in the audience, can I say a big thank you to all our speakers for 3 absolutely fascinating, in very different ways, presentations. And I think we've all learned something new about entertainment at the Seaside today. So thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our audience for coming. And just to remind you that our next seminar is on the 20th of March, is on the theme of transport heritage at the Seaside. But can I ask you just to give a big virtual clap to our speakers once more? And that's it.
Brilliant. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
See you next
everyone.
time.
All the best. Cheers, love. Bye.